So I'd like to thank all of you for coming this afternoon. And we're here to remember our beloved friend, Mike Varble, father, grandfather, teacher, friend, and damn good bridge player. I'll tell you, Mike, Mike told me a few years ago, dementia ain't for sissies. That was the only time I ever heard Mike complain about anything. Remembering this now makes me think that although I wasn't smart enough to figure it out at the time, that what Mike was telling me is that facing death requires courage. And indeed it does. Mike's courage was the power to continually confront a world that is not fair. And it is a quiet determination not to beg or to pray for that which will never be given. When death arrives at the end of a long and healthy life, it is never welcome, but sometimes it is not deeply resented. However, this death has taken from us Mike, robbing us of his sense of humor, his gentleness, his kindness, and his commitment to his family and his friends. Yes, this death is a most unwelcome guest. Courage that Mike had is loving life, even in the face of death. It is sharing our strength with those that we love, even as we feel weak or depressed. And it is embracing our family and friends, even when we fear to lose them. And finally, it is always opening ourselves up to enduring love, even for the last time. Courage is self-esteem. It prefers quiet determination to complaining. And courage also reminds us that sometimes we prefer doing to waiting. And courage affirms the fact that life's exit is just as important as life's entrance and has its own dignity. Mike Varble, whom we loved and admired, has left us. However, of course, his memory will live on in the hearts of those many people who were touched by his love and his friendship. Mike, we're all here. The conversation is therapeutic. The food is delicious. But Mike, it just isn't the same without you. Now, I know what you'll say. How could you go ahead and schedule an event in my honor when I can't make it? But Mike, what we need you to do now is to sit back and rest. We'll take it from here. And now a moment of silence, just in memory of Mike. Thank you. Mary?
Right here.
Please.
Thank you.
Do you want this?
Yeah. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Mike's childhood and his growing up years. When Mike was about 4 or maybe 3.5, we moved from a basement apartment in Chicago to Montpelier in northwestern Ohio. Our furniture didn't come and didn't come and didn't come. Every day we spent some time at our new house hoping to see a moving van. Mike had never lived where he could see out the windows, so he went from one room to the other enjoying all the views. Mike started kindergarten when we were in Montpelier. He and I were good friends as children because we moved so often and we didn't, we were always meeting new kids. My mother's good friend Ruth needed a place to live for about 2 months. This was when we were in Montpelier. She would move to Guatemala at the end of the school year, but her lease was up before that, so she came to stay with us and sleep in my bedroom. I was moved into Mike's room in his double bed. We thought this was great fun to go to bed and then talk and talk. No one could hear us since Mother and Ruth were playing duets on the piano downstairs. They were making a lot of noise. One of our vacations while in Montpelier was to visit friends in Golden, Colorado. There were 3 children, a boy of about 12 and twin girls who were nearly 3. We enjoyed climbing some large hills there and exploring new places. However, Mike came down with mumps, so we left very quickly, hoping the other kids didn't catch that. When Mike was about 7, we moved to Madera, a suburb of Cincinnati. When he got a little older, he became a patrol boy there. Madera had only 1 stoplight, so it was a very small town. During these years, we started camping for our family vacations. We usually stayed in the same state park for several days and then moved on. Sometimes Mike and Dia would lash logs together to make us a bench for the campsite, or they would dig a pit to bake beans in the ground. Mike and I loved to swim in the lakes and played for hours in the water. We especially enjoyed using goggles and masks and snorkel tubes. When Mike was in 6th grade, the family moved to East Cleveland, and he finished the end of that school year there. One of his first adventures there was to break off a front tooth. My parents hurried to find a dentist in their new home. Eventually that tooth needed to be replaced. All these pictures look so nice with this nice straight tooth. In Shaw High School, Mike joined a grade club, a group of boys who were best friends, ate lunch together at school, sat together at football games, and so forth. Mike really enjoyed singing in the high school choir. He became part of a group called the Rhythm Teens, 8 singers and a small combo of musicians who toured the area for entertainment at meetings and celebrations. In high school, he had lots of friends and led an active social life. He told me I hadn't raised our parents right because I didn't get my driver's license at 16, so he had to break the ice with driving and borrowing the car and all those things. One of the fun things, when I was working at the East Cleveland Public Library, I would sometimes work until 9 o'clock when the library closed at night. And then usually somebody would come and pick me up so I didn't have to go home in the dark. And often it was Mike on his bike. He was in about 8th grade at that time. So the fun part was I would ride on the crossbar of his bike, and we would sing at the top of our lungs the whole way down Euclid Avenue, down Eddy Road. I was in college when Mike was in high school, so we really didn't share a lot after I left home, but we shared long visits when I did come home. He was a great friend. My son, Eric Walmark, will read some words that were written by our cousin, my cousin, and Mike's, Pete Ekstrom.
This appears to be titled Mike and I in Isle Royale. It was the summer of 1960, I think. Mike and I went on an adventure. We were cousins, the same age, had older sisters, and were Presbyterian preachers' kids. Most of us were all the best of friends. No one of us had done anything like this before. Isle Royale was a roadless wilderness national park in the middle of Lake Superior. The trip involved a 6-hour boat trip from Houghton in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. After much preparation, off we went, after high school graduation, to the island for a 10-day wilderness backpacking trip. Mike and I had an unforgettable coming-of-age, quotes, experience. We stayed off the trails and bushwhacked into a small lake, one of 50 on the island, and set up camp. Nothing super exciting really happened with the possible exception of seeing 4 gigantic moose legs pass within 6 feet of our plastic lean-to shelter during the night. But we really got to become fast friends and made a close-knit cousin relationship that would last. We spent our time hiking, fishing out of a packed-in small rubber raft, camp cooking, reading The Organization of Man, Why, he says, and having some good campfire conversations. We have both remembered fondly that seminal trip. Mike and I have always had a special relationship, and that trip has always been a tipping point in our friendship, even when at times years separated our being together. Mike and I always remember our trip and the friendship that trip cemented. I will miss not seeing you and our retelling of that important trip.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's more.
Small says.
Still, you will always be my friend and favorite cousin, Pete.
Brian, the words of Brian Larson, a friend of Mike's since they were in college together at Allegheny College, will be read by Ben.
I think Brian is one of my dad's oldest friends and one of his dearest
Friend
friends.
is longest stand.
Sorry. Longest standing. And he will be here tomorrow, so I'm reading these remarks from him. I first met Mike at some point during school year 1964 to 1965 at Allegheny College, nearly 60 years ago. I cannot now recall the exact date or circumstance, but whatever the situation, we quickly became friends, which was easy as Mike was one of the most congenial, easygoing, and affable persons I've ever known. For different reasons, Mike and I both took a bit longer than the standard 4 years to fulfill college graduation requirements. Rather than wallow in abject humility, we chose to regard ourselves as super seniors. In the fall 1966 term, we were both dealing with the dreaded senior thesis, usually at least a full-term project that also involved an oral exam. I needed a place to stay, and Mike generously invited me to become his roommate. This was mutually beneficial in a couple of ways. As it turned out, we had each chosen topics in different periods of African American history, and we were using some of the same source books. For weeks on end, we would hunker down in the dorm room and pass books back and forth while smoking way too many cigarettes and slurping vast quantities of coffee, and then make midnight trips to an all-night diner. It was a real bonding experience. Just a few days after my oral exam, I was in Texas to begin my stint in the U.S. Air Force, so we didn't see each other at all for the next 4 years. But we kept in touch, and by the time I got out of the service, Mike and Bobby had married and were living in Lakewood. I made many trips to Cleveland, initially by Greyhound, and then lived with Mike and Bobby for several months while substitute teaching until I found a full-time job and made my permanent move to Cleveland in early 1973. In the years since, we have gathered many times in each other's homes, played many card games and board games, shared many dinners, attended many events, and shared many good times, often with other friends. We rejoiced at the birth and growth of our sons. John sat for our kids, and we bought Cutco knives from Ben. I didn't add that. That was in here. Mike and Bobby love traveling, and my wife, Lori, and I accompanied them on a number of trips, including San Antonio, Europe, Israel, and a cruise in the Caribbean. One of Mike's great passions was singing. He, Bobby, and Lori were members of the Western Reserve Chorale, and one of the best trips we enjoyed together was when the chorale took a week-long trip to the Loire Valley in France, where they performed a concert in a centuries-old cathedral. I was allowed to tag along as a non-singing drudge. We all stayed in a converted priory which had once been used as a way station for crusaders. Through it all, I have always much appreciated being in Mike's good company. We all have many happy reasons to call Mike to mind. In doing so, we will not dwell on how he experienced diminished cognitive function in his last several years. Rather, we will recall the Mike we knew well for all these many years, a kind, patient, and companionable mensch who was simply a good person to spend time with. That's how I will remember him. That's from Brian Larson.
Spike. Some in this room know Spike because of his longtime involvement with the Jewish secular community, in which Bobby and Mike were also active. But as Spike will tell us, he knew Mike long before that. Go ahead, Spike.
Okay, so it's an honor for me to address you and honor my friend Mike Varble. I asked to speak about my relationship with Mike as it had many chapters, starting way back in my troublemaking, hormone-rich days at Lee Barneston Junior High School. I got very good grades in junior high school, which I attribute to being in detention just about every night of the week. Now, I treated detention as a convenient time to do homework and my study. It was in 8th grade that I first met Mike. He and Danny Gedeldig were co-teachers for social studies. I don't remember much from social studies, but I do remember the unavoidable convenient space to place a thumbtack on the seat of Bill Eberling as he was leaning out of his seat and not paying attention. When he sat down, he let out a yell that turned everyone's head in the classroom, including the teachers. So while being a good student, I was not very bright or very devious because the thumbtacks were right at my desk. So it was for this offense I received my one and only SWAT. It was Mr. Gedeldig was the paddler and Mike was the witness. The next day in gym class, I was the marvel of the locker room as my butt was remarkably black and blue. I can say it was probably the only time my butt has been the subject of admiration. The next chapter with Mike was when I joined the Jewish secular community right out of college in 1977. It was there that I met Mike and Bobby and began our long friendship. I recall feeling like a real adult having a friendship with making a false impression of being like a real adult having a friendship with someone who was a teacher of mine. At that time, JSC hosted events in members' homes, which I appreciated because it was a great way to interact and develop friendships. It was at that time we started spending time together socially. Other times, or other chapters with Mike beyond our interactions at Jewish secular community events were indirectly through Bobby. I was a frequent customer of her framing gallery, Hang It Up, which was located at Cedar and Fairmount. I had many things framed by Bobby as I was collecting art and decorating my first home. That was, I think, in the middle 80s. Is that right, Bobby?
That would make sense.
I didn't do any fact checking. My memory isn't always perfect. When Christy moved in
You're
with
the
me
young one.
what's that?
And you're the young one.
Yes, when Christy moved in with me in 1991, there was even more art to frame. Pretty much everything in my house has been framed by Bobby, and she was especially helpful getting us started with our youthful budgets. Another chapter in our relationship was Bobby's role as Madrig for the Jewish secular community, where she officiated the wedding of me and Christy at the Pine Lake Trout Club not far from here. Me and Bobby did a great job at the ceremony, and she approved of the Star Trek recessional music at the end of the ceremony.
Live long and
Where we
prosper.
proudly went, where no one had gone before. Additional chapters with Mike was that directly involved Mike was my role as tech advisor for family computer purchases. Mike researched his choices very carefully, and his purchases were prudent and thoughtful. He was interested in learning how his tech worked and only needed occasional support. I don't know about his tech support for Bobby, other than it must have been a challenge. And I do recall that Bobby wanted to record incredible amounts of live television to watch later. And I had this vision of her sitting watching TV on the sofa as a couch potato with sprouts all coming out of her and getting wrapped in the fabric. And with Mike bringing her food and things to drink as she was watching every soap you could imagine, or I don't know what it was, but there was lots of them. There was also the chapter of inviting ourselves, my wife and I, to visit Mike and Bobby at their cottage on the lake. We enjoyed our stay with the enjoyable meals, walks, and boating. And we listened patiently to both Mike and Bobby boast about their cottage improvements and the many maintenance tasks that were required. I admired their industriousness, but was glad we could just visit, converse, and enjoy the lovely retreat from the normal routine of life in the city. There's a chapter of Mike's life that I regret missing. Now that I'm approaching retirement and looking forward to travel, I wish I would have invited Christy and myself to join Mike and Bobby on some of their trips. I was working at the time and didn't feel like I could afford to do that, and I was worried that a long trip with them might result in me smelling like a dead fish after just a few days and her wanting to get rid of me, or Mike and Bobby not wanting to be with us. I also have another regret to confide. I always wish that Mike and Bobby would lead the Jewish secular community in Shabbat and holiday services and singing. The fact that they were members of the Jewish secular community often surprised me, because I think a subliminal requirement to be a member is that you must be musically challenged. I eventually concluded that the reason Mike and Bobby didn't take a more active role in choir directing is that they must have realized it would be a long and thankless and fruitless endeavor. So I do recall when Mike and Bobby sharing Mike's Alzheimer's diagnosis with us many years ago, and I was amazed and impressed with the fortitude of how they accepted their situation and their plans to manage. It's a tribute to the relationship and their compassion for each other, how well they did that. Grace and kindness was as much a part of Mike's personality, character, that even in his decline, he was really unchanged from his true self. I'm certain that I would be mean and cranky. Bobby, your devotion to Mike during this time was amazingly heroic. It was inspirational and a role model. You have my admiration and my heartfelt respect. There's now a new chapter being written, a chapter of remembrance, friendship, and strength of character, and a chapter of comfort. Your friends, family, and community will be there to support you in your time of need. We will help you write this chapter of the story together with the happy, upbeat Hollywood ending that I might imagine Mike would appreciate.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Longtime friends of Mike and Bobby are Gary and Sandy Pangonis. Sandy, did you want to say a few words, please?
I brought props. Use these. My husband Gary met Bobby at a job interview in 1970 at Huron Road Hospital. Gary got hired and he and Bobby worked together in human resources. And eventually Bobby, Mike, Gary, and I became friends. Gary and I are not able to remember how the board game Acquire came into the picture, but it quickly became a years-long obsession. We played every chance we got. Many weekends way into the night and early morning hours were spent playing this game. Pack up your boys, John and Ben, put them in the car, and take them to Sandy and Gary's house and put them to bed. Pack up Todd and Bradley, pack them in the car, take them to Bobby and Mike's house, put them to bed, and play games. And we got down to business once the kids were in bed. Nothing was better than the satisfaction one got by beating the other 3 players. And if you did, lots of bragging went on until the next time we played. We drove through bad snowstorms to get to each other's houses. Luckily, the trip from Cleveland Heights to South Euclid wasn't too far. We even drove to the Varble house during the storm that became the blizzard of '76. Of course, we played all night because we knew we weren't going to go to work the next day.
Oh, that is beat up.
Oh, my.
Here's the 50-year-old game that we played. And here are the notes about who won what games.
I remember that.
Want to hold that up? It got quite a workout. But inside, in some of the serious record keeping, are dates from April of '78, November of '79, October of '80, and March of '83, and so on. And I see a sarcastic note on my part that I won the first time on July 23rd, '78, after playing for 6+ years.
Wait, stop, 1 minute.
Fact check.
Notice it's pristine condition.
Gary got the movie prize.
As you can tell, mine is much better.
Well, I guess yours didn't get a workout like ours did.
Yours didn't come back and forth in the snowstorms.
That's right.
And Brian and Albie's names are in there too.
Uh-huh.
Our friendship led to vacationing multiple times at the Peaceman Cottages in Conneaut, down the big hill to the cottages, right onto the lake, or the beach, which eventually took over the cottages and they got washed into the water. The kids had a ball. There, as Bobby said, there were no true right angles in any of the cottages, and you had to walk uphill or downhill to get across the room. And everything smelled musty, but it was perfect vacation for 4 boys and 4 acquire-addicted adults, and it was cheap too. Mike would sail his little sailboat when weather permitted. Mike and only one other person could sail at a time, and we always enjoyed it when it was our turn. He loved his little sailboats, and when he put the sail up, he would refer to it in Mike's speak as Joyce the Klabortsnik. One last memory of Mike, wait, hold on, Jude. The intuitive teacher in him invented a game that hugely appealed to our hyperactive son. It was simply Mike calling out made-up words and the kid responding in kind. So he would say the first word, which was sissum, and then Brad would respond and yell sissum. And that, for some reason, was just hilarious to him. And the other 2 words that Mike made up were kokits and frabbish. So sissum, kokits, and frabbish was their special game, and endless entertainment for Brad, thanks to Mike. I could go on, but I won't. Kudos to Mike for being a kind, gentle, smart, funny guy, and to Gary and I, a great friend. And Bobby, we want to honor you in the wonderful way you took care of our good friend. Do you remember this girl?
No, I'm sorry. I'm old. I don't remember. I don't have a bag.
Don't mess that lid up.
Do you?
Scream.
Yes, right, right.
That's okay.
We had a different thing, actually.
Clean it up.
Oh, we've got it until 6. We've got you. Right? You did can't take it.
We have. But we may as well quit well.
So on my list to speak is Celeste.
Hope I don't step on anybody's toes. I too am a teacher, past teacher, so I brought Pops as well. It's part of the system. Whoops. So Bobby, I know you have pictures up. These are just a few more for you that you didn't have.
Oh, can I keep them?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. If there was room on that board, we could put them up, but you've got it all.
Well, there are
That's
some
wonderful.
of you.
I know, we talked about some of those. So I'm here to talk about Mike. I'm Celeste Cresa. My husband Gene is back there, and we have been friends with Mike and Bobby since Mike took my position at Hillside Middle School, of all things. It took my job. Well, actually, I gave it up. I was retiring. And Mike just loved teaching. What can I say? He loved being around kids, kept him youthful. He liked that. So I started at Hillside Middle School, and Mike came in 2003 in the fall. And I took an early buyout. That was the thing back then, get rid of the expensive people. So in 2003, he was transferring from Parma Senior High School. He wanted to get back to the middle school. So he came over and started looking around and sort of seeing the layout of the land. And I wanted to tell Mike everything about the middle school because we had just changed to houses. This was a term where we had paws and claws and pride and spirit. Those were all groups of houses. So I figured Mike would need to know all that. So I'm busy chatting away, explaining everything, and Mike, in his kind, gentle soul, is just looking around, and just taking everything in. And all of a sudden, I stopped talking, and Mike said, "Do you and your husband play bridge?" Where did that come from? I was so surprised. It just shocked me. I didn't even know how to answer at first. And I thought, well, he wants an answer. Well, yes, I said. I bet there's a lot of people in this room that Mike and Bobby asked, "Do you play bridge?" Because that seems to be a common thing I've heard here. So I said, yeah. Well, that one little answer of yes made a lifelong friend with Mike and Bobby. Thank you for being part of our lives. He often referred to you as his bride. I don't know if you knew that, but he often said, "my bride," and I thought that was such an endearing term, to always think of you as his bride, and he still is. But I'm here to talk about Mike the educator. Now, Mike loved working with children, and at Hillside, teachers and staff loved working with Mike. So these are a few quotes that I received from the staff. They sent me when I sent out an email to as many email people I had from the staff about Mike's passing, because it's been quite a few years. Mike was a gem to work with. Mike was a wonderful, generous man. I enjoyed doing ski club with Mike for 4 years. Mike was a wonderful, gentle, kind soul. Mike was always willing to help. Now, that's just a sum of those things in between the birth and the death. This is the important part. How you live your life, what you do to impact Earth, what we're here to be about. And that's the part that we want to remember about Mike. He made a difference to everyone. He was here as the gentle, kind soul sent to us to help us remember that. We are here on Earth for a purpose. Get this up together. Mike continued at Hillside after I retired. He worked another 4 years there and retired in 2007. Now Mike became our friend, and Mike, with a gentle nudge from Bobby, introduced Dean and I to a thing called duplicate bridge. He also invited us to their summer home at Holiday Camplands in Andover, Ohio. And within a week of knowing Mike and visiting him at Camplands, we bought a place. We became their neighbors across the lake. Well, that was just one of the ways, the many ways that they influenced our lives. Speaking of Holiday Camplands, one night Mike and Bobby came across Galt Lake on their pontoon boat to our home. It was dark when they left back to their house, to go back to the house. They had stayed, we had played cards, I think, until dark. So they got, I was a little concerned about them going down to the dock because it was bumpy and lots of goose poop around, that kind of thing. So I went and got a large flashlight and I held it on them so they could find their way down to the dock. They got on their pontoon boat and started crossing the lake. I kept the light on them as they motored across the lake. It was one of those special visual moments of two people moving through the darkness of the night with a light to guide them home. Mike has been guided to his everlasting home. He will be waiting to greet Bobby when she is ready to make the journey. Mike and Bobby had a special connection. The connection was called love. It was so strong that you could not talk about Mike without talking about Bobby. Mentioning those names because they just went together. They completed and complemented each other. We were very blessed to have Mike in our life, and we will continue to keep in touch with Bobby. They have made a lasting impression on Jean and I, as I'm sure that they have for others, many of you here today. We love you, Mike, and we miss you dearly. Thank you for letting me stop. There's some extra special pictures. Oh, isn't this a lovely picture of Mike and Bobby? Asheville, North Carolina, Biltmore. Yes, that's yours. And just to remind you about cards, I brought all the jokers from the Biltmore card deck. We saved so many cards, I don't even know what to do with them anymore. Panama Canal, where they went on a trip with us, and that's the other Panama Canal. And in case you don't know, we also cruised. Okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you for letting me talk and giving you time.
Thank you.
Love you all.
We've come to the list, to the end of the list of people who wanted to say something. Ben,
I'll say something. It's okay? I'll say something.
please.
Our dad was a great father. We probably didn't appreciate that as much growing up because we considered him to be a little strict. We also thought at times he was too sappy and emotional. But as we grew older, we learned that what we thought of as strict was really his very healthy focus on education. And that sappiness was really a reflection of how genuine and sentimental he was. When we were in school, our dad wanted us to get our homework done every day before we could play basketball in the driveway with our friends or watch TV. But Dad didn't stop there. He would often speak with our teachers about what we were learning and how we were doing in school. He even made us take a typing class over the summer one year when he realized that it wasn't part of our high school's curriculum. We thought to ourselves, do the parents of other kids do this? I mean, this guy took 7 years to get through college. But Dad's involvement with our education really helped us in our lives. We were also so proud of him when he went back to Cleveland State University later in life, after having already received a Master of Education degree, to earn the additional credentials required to become a guidance counselor, his true calling. His commitment to education in his career, for his own personal development, and with both of us, has always been an inspiration. But as serious as he was about education, Dad always seemed to be even more in tune with people's feelings. He often expressed his emotions, even sadness, and it wouldn't be surprising to see him get choked up or even observe him crying over what we considered to be mundane events, like when family came over to visit or upon hearing stories of injustice on the news. Once again, we didn't have the maturity to understand why our father appeared to be weepy sometimes. We didn't realize that his demonstrated empathy for others allowed him to connect on a truly personal level with everyone he met, students, colleagues, friends, and of course his family. To this day, we can't think of anyone that didn't like him or couldn't get along with him. Our dad taught us that it's okay to be the nice guy, to sympathize with people, and especially to treat everyone with kindness. His sentimentality did not make him weak. It was a core strength of his character. In summary, we think our dad would like to be remembered as a force for positive change with those who are blessed to have known him. As a father, he'd be proud to know that he taught us so much, inspired us to carry on his legacy of kindness, and that as I read this, we can become just as weepy as he was. Our dad was a great father, and we will always love him.
On a lighter note, I had planned to make some remarks and realized that, unlike my sons and friends, I couldn't possibly get through them without breaking down. But I did want you to know one thing that other people have not actually stressed. And that is that Mike Varble was a true romantic. I'm not saying that he never got angry, but if he got angry at me, he would go out and buy me flowers. And he gave the best foot rubs. He learned to give foot rubs and gave the best foot rubs for 45 years. And he never, even in the course of his dementia, he never, and he was very sad about it, he would say, I don't want to be this way. And I would say, I know, but, and then I would talk about all the wonderful things that we had done and we're still doing, and et cetera, et cetera. So he knew what was going on, but he never got angry. I was very angry, but he never let it get to him. And the last words he said to me before he passed out and never woke up were, I love you. And I told him the same thing. And I will never regret that we exchanged that. So thank you. Everything else that I could possibly have said about Mike, everyone has said. Apparently you all agree with me. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Mark, for your devotion and your attention and for sharing this incredible moment with us. We will never forget it. Thank you all.
As we bring our remembrance of Mike to a close, and we remember all of the things that Mike gave us, I think there's one thing that we should give him, and we will give him, and that is the gift of memory. For as long as we live, we will remember Mike for his kindness, his gentleness, being a romantic, but being a real human being and a mentor to some. So, Mike, you'll always be in our hearts. Thank you all for coming and for sharing. I'm not asking you to leave, but we are bringing this section to a...
And the bells are ringing.
As I was saying,
How apropos could that be?
the bells have rung. Thank you very much.
Well played.
You were 2 seconds off. Yeah.